Dr. Scott Sherr, I want to talk about the neuroscience, the neurochemistry of building muscle and performance. Because this is a piece that I think we're getting to. If I'm thinking about building muscle, like 5 years ago, I would have just been thinking about how much mechanical tension can I put on my muscle, or metabolic load or stress on my muscle to trigger adaptation. Now there's this whole new world that's unfolding for people that are trying to build muscle, trying to lose fat, trying to improve performance on optimizing even their neurochemistry and their sympathetic or parasympathetic state to get in the optimal state to build muscle, which is really cool. You as, really a neurochemistry and neurotransmitter expert is what I would consider you.
Nerd.
Just a nerd. Can you kind of give us a basic understanding of how this works? And let's have this discussion.
I put a link down below for 30% off all things from Thrive Market on your first order. Now, they're not just about snacks and pantry staples. They've got good, legit, high protein foods, which is how I live. Even my snacks are high protein. Thing is, if you go to a grocery store, the high protein snacks, they're kind of playing games with you. They'll call it high protein, but you look at the ingredients and you realize that there's some weird kind of pea protein or something. Not that there's anything wrong with pea protein, but the reality is it's not what it seems on the surface. And it might only be 4 grams of protein. The thing I like about Thrive is you see what you get and you get what you see. It's transparent. So you can look at the ingredients and they're not going to have garbage there, and you're going to be able to see it. And then it gets delivered right to your doorstep. So you're not having to spend time. Even myself, I know what to look for at a grocery store, but it takes me probably 25% longer to go grocery shopping than the average person because I do cross-reference everything that's in the ingredients. I don't like to bring that stuff into my house. Thrive Market takes that guesswork out of the equation for me, and it makes it accessible to me, but it makes it accessible to people all over the country. So that's what's really cool. So that link gets you 30% off your entire first grocery order and gets you a free $60 gift. Not to mention it gets delivered right to your doorstep, which is pretty darn cool, and their shipping is speedy fast. So that link down below.
I mean, it's such a nuanced discussion, but the real key is that over the last several years, we now know that if you want to build muscle, you have to shut off your sympathetic nervous system. You have to relax that stress, fight or flight response that you're using to build muscle in the first place. So like you said, initially it's well, how much tension can I put on the muscle? How much can I lift? And then how much can I do the next day? And how much can I do the following day? But we're overtraining, as you know. And as a result of that, your body never gets into that parasympathetic system, that parasympathetic recovery. This is inside your workouts themselves, as you know now, along with after your workouts. Because after your workout, what happens is you get this huge increase in something called growth hormone, right? Growth hormone, which helps us build muscle, helps us grow lots of things as well. But in this case, muscle. It also helps us sleep. It also helps us sleep. And so if you're not allowing your body to get into the parasympathetic mode, you're not going to be able to recover, and you're not going to build the kind of muscle that you want to build.
Interesting. So if you are, actually in that stress state, you hear people talk about how, quote unquote, cortisol is catabolic, things like that.
Yeah.
I know that's a very general term,
but
right?
It's true. Yeah.
But, and it's probably overplayed in the bodybuilding community.
Yeah.
Where it's okay, well, don't work out too long because your cortisol. Okay. Yes, I understand.
Yeah. It's just the prolonged cortisol that we care about. That the prolonged cortisol, that's going to become much more catabolic.
Got it. Yeah. So you've got this cortisol, but then what other things are happening? Perhaps here's where it's hard for people to wrap their head around. And it was hard for me to wrap my head around at first. Stress is good,
yes,
as the stimulus. But obviously the big $1 million question for most people is, okay, well, how much stress, right? That hormetic curve,
right?
But also I've kind of coined the term almost like the hormetic curve, but more of the fitness hormetic curve. What is the dose that you need to build muscle? Or
right.
Because everyone hormesis, they're typically thinking longevity. I'm well, okay, yeah, but some of us are performance minded.
For sure, yeah.
And that curve probably looks different.
And changes, right?
Yeah.
Depending on where you are in your fitness cycle, right? Because to get to your hormetic stress that's going to help you build is going to change the more that you've already built. Versus if you're just starting to work out and you've never worked out before, your hormetic stress that's required is going to be much less to see a significant benefit. So it is challenging because you have to think about the hormetic stress as definitely a longevity thing, but definitely for performance too. And the issue there is that when you're causing a eustress, like a normal stress to the body, which is a hormetic stress, is it going to be hormetic stress or not? Sometimes you don't know. And sometimes if you work out, for example, and you feel sore for like 7 days afterwards, that was probably too much, but sometimes you don't know until you know. But the key is to be able to build over time, as people do. Most people know this when they're exercising. I mean, there's always like the random 30-year-old that hasn't exercised in 5 years and thinks that they can go back and what they did 5 years ago at the gym, and then they end up in the hospital with rhabdo, which is like when the muscles break down because you were not ready to go do that anymore. That's not eustress, that's bad stress, that kind of thing. So that happens.
What is, to the best of your knowledge, happening somewhat neurochemically during, let's say, just a hard resistance training workout? Like, I mean, you're obviously you're clearly going sympathetic. Like that's
clearly,
the point,
yeah, clearly.
Right? So, talk to me like I'm 5 years old here for a second, because neurochemistry can be, what do you think's happening? And there's probably a million different things, but basic level.
From a neurochemistry perspective, when you're causing a sympathetic activation, which is like your fight or flight. So super simple, if you're running from a lion or if you're trying to pick up a huge boulder, you need to have all of your strength to be able to do that. So you need hormones in the body that are going to allow you to do that. So the hormones that give us strength, give us focus, give us power are the ones that most of us know about. Your norepinephrine, your epinephrine, for example, your cortisol. These three hormones are your main three that are giving you the push, the drive. So everybody's heard these stories of somebody's stuck underneath a car or something like that, and the tire is on them, but somehow some dude is able to come up and actually lift up the car and take that person out from underneath the car. Like, you hear these stories because you can get these like superhuman types of strength because of these hormones under certain conditions. But it's not like you won't potentially pay for it after doing that, because it can be at the detriment of the muscular system depending on the situation. But in general, that's an extreme case. But in general, what's happening with exercise is that those hormones are being released while you're under sympathetic dominance. And then what's supposed to happen is that they're supposed to go and quickly downregulate themselves, quickly come out of the system. And as a result, as that comes down, your parasympathetic system is supposed to come up, which is your rest digest system. That's your GABA system, for example. And as a result of that GABA system coming up, the system's able to now start the recovery process, which is rebuilding those muscles that you just were shearing because of all the strength that you're trying to put in them. Because when we're trying to build muscle, we have to break down muscle fibers to be able to do that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because from even an ancestral perspective, that's probably how things worked. Like,
yes.
You would probably, and you didn't have the milieu of different things happening in life. It was pretty, let's just even go so far as saying like the cortex probably wasn't as developed in 100,000 years ago, right? So maybe, who knows, maybe it was, maybe it was, probably not. But like,
yeah.
It's so the ability to like think and stress and future trip was probably less. So you'd be like, hunt or be hunted and run, sprint, everything's fine.
Exactly. And you know this in nature now, when you see an animal that's being preyed upon by a prey animal, when they are getting chased, they're scared, right? And then as soon as that somehow they get away,
back to chewing grass.
Back to this, like 5 seconds later, right? And then what you actually see them do is that they actually have this shivering like response. You can watch National Geographic and see this. They have this way of completely downregulating their nervous system extremely, extremely fast, because we're not supposed to be under chronic stress all the time. Back when we were hunter-gatherers, Paleolithic times, there were definitely stresses, but the stresses were much more defined and much more like you were either a 0 or a 1. Yeah. Either you were on or you were off. Now, as societies got larger and there were like social communities, and then all those hormones started getting released because you were worried that somebody looked at you funny and that you might be kicked out of the group. And so the social constructs of chronic stress have definitely just been exponentially augmented over the last many decades, many generations now, because of how we live. But in general, those stress hormones are only supposed to get released when we're under significant duress, and then we're supposed to come down off them very quickly.
Okay, so what I'm getting from this and what I've kind of started to feel is we really have to think of this as like on off.
Yes.
Like, really don't stress about it and make a stressful situation out of it. But it's because I've seen basketball players, like particularly like in NBA, like some of them that have these like really good, when sometimes they're getting benched and back on the court really fast. They almost have rituals. Like I noticed, like to downregulate, like some of them, and you're starting to see, was it the 49ers? And then there's also a couple college teams that have like now literally hired sideline breath coaches, like get them to downregulate,
That's awesome. I haven't seen
which is
that.
awesome.
Yeah.
But I've seen like NBA players like come off court and they like do things like that.
Yep.
And almost like an energetic release. You see like people be like if they feel like they're in an area with bad energy, they literally can like they feel like they shake it off, right?
Yeah.
Our mutual friend Alan, I noticed he's done that a couple times when something's like, but like there's a more woo-woo-y side, but then there's also like there's people like do things that work for you. Like for me, like I a lot of times, like my newer thing, like I told you, this is new as of like a few weeks ago, but it seemingly works so well, is after like a hard set, I won't do it in a public gym because I don't want to get a staph infection, but like I'll flop on the ground and like nasal breathe, just hardcore, like just parasympathetic. And I can feel, the best way to describe it is a whoosh. It's
and you know what happens, right? Yeah.
Floods over my body.
You can get sensitized to that so that you can do it intra-workout and then be able to maximize your sympathetic drive the next set, but then drop it down to parasympathetic. You're going to get the most bang for your buck for a much even shorter workout potentially than you would have otherwise. So, and because not only during workout, but after the workout, we need to get parasympathetic. Otherwise, we can't actually build that muscle back. So you want to build, you have to relax. If you want to build, you have to relax. I can say that it's so hard for people to realize that. It's like, and this is more common now, but over the last several years, it's been a huge shift, right? Because it's been crazy because like just train. And like you have your CrossFit people that go like every single day. And that can be really, really tough on the system. Why do you get more injuries? Why do you see people drop out of these things so much? Is because they're overtraining and they're not allowing their system to recover.
Like the message that I would have for, especially, and this is important for everyone, but especially for like people in their 20s, right? Like, okay, and it doesn't mean don't listen if you're not in your 20s, but I have a lot of, like if I ever go to public gyms, which I try not to do a whole lot.
You don't like the grunting and the screaming?
I don't mind it. I just, people watch me and look at me or they recognize me. And I like that. I love talk, but, when I'm working out, when I know a bunch of people are just like watching me work out, it feels kind of funny. But like usually the people that will come up to me in the gym to ask a question, which I love, are going to be probably 20 some odds, because they're gym culture, they're there, they want to take a picture. And they'll ask me like, what my tips would be to build muscle or things like that. And it's like the one thing I really want to like tell these young kids, it's so hard for them to understand.
Get off the
what they think about, that's really important.
That's a big one.
But it's so binary in some ways. Like, okay, sleep is when I'll rest. I need to grow, stimulate, and my rest occurs when I sleep.
When you sleep,
so even then they'll still like, unfortunately add performance enhancing compounds on top of performance enhancing compounds on top of on top of stimulants, because more. And then I'll just sleep hard and grow. Like that's a temporary fix. You might get the growth that you're after, but you're going to get more growth cycles, so to speak, the sooner or longer growth cycles. If you can downregulate and start the recovery immediately after your workout. And then your point two, which I would have forgotten if you didn't mention, is yes, the last thing that you want to do, and this is especially for middle-aged people, is go to the gym and then in between your sets, stress yourself out by checking your email or something. Like you're mixing two stressors, one that's more cerebral and mental, one that's physical, but your body doesn't know the difference.
It's the same neurotransmitters, man, right? So that's the one thing I always try to emphasize to people that I work with. It's like if you're exercising, exercise, go hard, and then relax. You do some stretching, do some balancing, do some breath work like you were doing, maybe not lying on the flat side of a Gold's Gym in the middle of some random location. No, last time it was actually cleaned, but so I get the staph infection thing. But so if you can become more parasympathetic, if you can relax more, you will see bigger gains with less work that you need to do in general.
What are some ways that you recommend? Obviously, like nasal breathing.
That's a big one.
Definitely a hard one for people to wrap their head around. It's been a recurring theme on this channel lately between guests and between myself. I think I've brought that into the ethos, probably just myself by thinking it and doing it. But like the more people I talk to, the people like, yes, like nasal breathe. So that's a big one. But what are some other ways that people might be able to? I mean, obviously, I'll plug your product as well.
That's all good. Yeah, I mean,
you've got. It's a great way. But I also want to talk just other ways too.
Yeah. So what I think about here is like, what are the behaviors that you can do, right? So certainly, nasal breathing can be very helpful, but just stop doing what you're doing, even no matter what it is, and just like stand still for 30 seconds. And very likely you're going to start getting more parasympathetic, or just sit down. Actually, even better to sit, right? So if you can change your positioning, like you talked about lying down, even if you don't nasal breathe and you lie down, you are going to get more parasympathetic that way. So that's going to be a big part of it. The other thing is I found that people, if they can get outside, if they can get a little bit of sunlight, that tends to calm down their nervous system as well. You can also, what I also have some people do is that I will have them, some people don't like eating a meal right after they work out, but eating a meal if you can prepare yourself to eat the meal, the meal actually kind of forces you to be a little bit parasympathetic as well, because you have to, if you have food in your stomach. So if you can kind of like relax yourself and then have a meal, that also can help you with recovery, because it's going to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system to actually start activating if you eat. Yeah. So, but again, if you're just like you're hammering and you're on your phone and you're eating and like, that's not going to do it, right? So it's like, it's a combination of things that really does it. So
Dr. Mike Israetel said that same thing about eating post-workout, because there's a lot of, evidence that it doesn't matter from protein synthesis standpoint too much when you eat it. But he's like, that's the one thing. He's like, it does get you into rest.
It does. Yeah. And so like, that forces the body to all of a sudden like, oh, I have all this food in my stomach. Now I have to actually digest it. So it will try to get more blood flow to your mesenteric nervous system, like where you're actually feeding the blood vessels that go to your intestines to help you digest your food. So it does help. But again, if you're like me and you have 4 kids and you're sometimes eating while you're cooking, and then you've just exercised from downstairs, and that's not a good way to get parasympathetic. Like you want to be like resting, sitting down, eating, and then you will see the benefit overall. So, but yeah, the key is, as you said, is really trying to kind of set up your life, if you can, to not go from like exercising hard to going and hard, whatever that else may be. So people sometimes go like exercise really hard at the gym and then go directly to work and directly to meetings, and they're on Zoom calls, and like just take like 5 or 10 minutes. That's all you need to do. And then just take breaks throughout the day as well as you're doing, whatever else that you're doing, to try to, number one, move, as we know, because people are sitting all the time, but also getting into that parasympathetic state. Nasal breathing is great, but the other piece of the nasal breathing that's important is just extending your exhales, right? So that when you're breathing in, try to increase the amount of time that you're breathing out versus what you're breathing in. So lots of different patterns, but the easiest one I find for people is just 3 seconds in and 5 seconds out. Even if you can just do that 5 times. I mean, I do it with my kids at night, and then they're done. They go to bed. It's easy.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very effective strategy. Yeah, just longer nasal exhale, then you're kind of building up the nitric oxide as well. Yeah. Not to mention, it's probably going to be a performance booster because of the nitric oxide buildup that you're getting as well, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And this is hard to quantify into like an RCT, like, but it's like, it's the science is so sound. It's just, we don't have RCTs showing like, oh, this group, got into parasympathetic faster, and but we just simply know that you're going to be catabolic if you're in a stressful state. Totally. Like the training itself is catabolic. The training itself is not when you're building muscle.
Exactly. Yeah. And people don't realize that. They think that they're building muscle when they're exercising, but no, it's the opposite. Exactly. So, but if you're in a pinch and you want to calm down the nervous system and you have a hard time doing it, it's not always easy to stop, not always easy to relax. I get that. Then enhancing the GABA system quickly can really help. So you can use things like kava, or like something like some GABAergic kinds of things, like other molecules or compounds that can help you. And there's lots of different things on the market. We have something called Trocom, as you know, that helps with relaxation, helps within about 15 to 30 minutes. That can really work. But if you're just looking at enhancing the GABA system, you can look at a lot of different compounds out there. I talked about kava, there's hanakyle, there's something called agarin, which we've discussed in other episodes and podcasts. There's also, what else? There's also magnolia bark, which is also from hanakyle, DHHB, which is actually an active form of the hanakyle. There's all these other things, passion flower, there's lots of ways to relax. Theanine, you know these, lots of different ones. Yeah.
Theanine's, I'll even take theanine like pre-workout. Yeah, because like I'll have caffeine, and then the theanine kind of chills me out.
Okay,
but I find that I come down a little faster.
There you go.
I've recently fallen back in love with theanine. I kind of fell out of the theanine world for a little while. Theanine's pretty awesome, but I've even tried using your Trocom. Again, I'll link down to it below, down underneath this video. But I've tried using that intra-workout, and for certain workouts like running, when I'm trying to like maybe stay calm. It works really, really, really well.
Pool workouts, you said, right?
Yeah, pool workouts when I'm doing stuff with, you can show footage like with Laird Hamilton and stuff like that, like being able when staying calm. So I think there could be an application from probably less if you're like going balls to the wall intra-workout, but if you are in a sport that maybe requires you to like be a little bit, you're not going. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say like maybe something like baseball where you're not like going hardcore anaerobic, but you like maybe need to stay calm.
I can see that
could work for a sport like that.
Maybe endurance as well, where you have to have like a maintenance kind of feel where you're not actually pushing it all out.
Your mind is arguably more important. And I think the common theme here with everything that we're talking about is like we're reaching a point where neuroscience and just how the brain works in general has become increasingly interesting in the world of sport and performance.
Yeah.
And I think we're finally elevating that up just to the general world of health and fitness and body composition too.
Exactly. And longevity too, right? It all plays together. It's not like you want to be just parasympathetic to grow muscle. You want to be parasympathetic so you don't die very early
for sure.
So that's kind of important.
And I think we've like really like do we need more studies on nutrition? Do we need more studies on exercise for building muscle and losing fat? Like, I just don't know if we do. Like, I think we could always do more, but I'm like inclined to think that like people that know how to do it, they know what you need to do to get shredded. They know what they need to do to build muscle from here down.
Right.
Like we know enough.
Yeah.
Always more. But I think the surface that hasn't been scratched yet, barely, is what's going on up here. And that's the biggest lever that we can pull.
Of course.
Because it's going to allow us to pull bigger levers in the gym, pull bigger levers in our recovery. Because at the end of the day, like it's all 98% of it's here.
And it's attached to the rest of you too.
Yeah.
People forget that, like we call the mind-body connection or whatever, but it's all like very connected. It's all aligned. And mindset, meditation, working on the neurochemistry from a parasympathetic perspective while doing things like meditation and mindfulness and learning that could be transformative to everything else that you do. Yeah.
You know, and I'm going to say this, I have no problem admitting that I'm not the biggest LeBron fan, but one thing that LeBron does, and he's an older athlete that is still crushing, is he prioritizes so much of these parasympathetic things.
Mm-hmm. He does. Yeah.
The breath work, the red light, the thing, like he's on it with that. So although he's not my favorite athlete, like I respect the hell out of like his regimen, right?
Right.
And for him to be able to perform at his age, and it's interesting that his name has come up a few times with just from people that were talking about just this like recovery and stuff like that. It's like, so if like the message to the 20 somethings, the wish things that I kind of wish,
you got to start
like,
then.
I wish that I prioritized.
Yeah.
Because I spent so many, and I pay the price for it now just with injuries and things like that too.
Especially if you're a high level athlete. There was a guy that I worked with in San Francisco many years named Bill Romanowski, he wore, I think, 5 Super Bowl titles from the San Francisco Giants. He was the first guy that
49ers or New York Giants?
San Francisco 49ers. Okay. Sorry, getting my sports wrong. He was the first guy to spend like over $1 million a year in just people following him around, like masseuses, acupuncturists. He had hyperbaric chambers, but he had an extremely long career for, I can't remember what position it was, but it's like a position that would be only like 3 to 5 years max. But he was there for 15 years in the NFL, doing what he did. So like he was one of the early pioneers. Now you have more and more people that are doing this and seeing that, like LeBron, for example. But this can translate to all of us too. You don't have to be an elite athlete if you're just trying to be as awesome as you can on a daily basis.
100%.
Like this all applies.
And I will end on one thing that is this is full disclosure. It's not something that's the most affordable option, but one thing that you turned me on to too is post workout hyperbaric. Like that's very, very good for recovery as well. Like but with that, you do need some luxury of time. They're not the cheapest things to go, and just, you might spend $100 for an hour to go sit in a chamber or have it at home. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much. But I will say, like, that is effective. And the professional athletes, a lot of them.
A lot of the guys do. I work with a lot of them that have them. Yeah. And so the key with that is to let the hormetic stress happen by the exercise, and then 2 to 3 hours later go into the chamber, just as a little tidbit. Yeah, exactly.
Right on, Scott. Well, where can everyone find you?
So I can be found at Dr. Scott Sherr, DrScottSherr on Instagram. Also, our company Transcriptions, that makes the Trocom that we kind of talked about a little bit here related to parasympathetic activation. That's at transcriptions.com, and also at Transcriptions on Instagram.
Right on, man.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Good to see you again.
You too.
All right.